first time?
Wow.
Look at those hands. See? You're like, what's all the hubbub, man? I've never heard this guy. You asked an interesting question, Christina. Why are you in this business? You know why I was in this business? I got married at 17. I got fired 5 times in a row trying to learn how to be an adult and trying to figure out how to be a good worker. And I learned that other people, if they control your purse strings, your future is not so bright. When I was 28 and a half years old, somebody came up to me and said, you know what, I'm going to show you the ropes about buying houses. I think you get really good at it. I went with them to visit somebody that was in foreclosure. At the time, I was selling electrical stuff to hardware stores. We went in, we were in the house for about 10 minutes. He did his presentation. We got kicked out. When we got back to the car, and this is true sometimes when you are just observing, that you observe things that other people don't that are participating. And when we got back to the car, I said, you didn't recognize it, but the lady was wanting to take your offer, but you kept talking. And she never had a chance, and then she got upset. So let me knock on the door, I'll get us back in, and we go buy the house. And we did it. When I drove home that night, I started thinking, isn't that interesting, what I know how to do in electrical sales, translated into tonight buying a house at a 40% discount. I got paid pennies for selling light bulbs and circuit breakers, and the guy that just bought that house made 20 grand in one shot. I'm really good at math, and I decided I would like to be in that world. To go to work for the company this guy worked for, I had to have a real estate license. I took a crash course, Lumlow taught it, took the weekend. Monday I took the test. How much did I know about real estate?
Nothing.
Nothing. I knew if an orange leaned on a fence and it fell on one side or the other, it was called something different than if it just stayed there. So what? That doesn't give me much experience to buy houses. I sat in front of the guy that owned the company within a day or two. His first question was, how long have you had your license? I said, 1 day. He laughed at me. He said, this is no place for an inexperienced agent. And he made a mistake. He thought I was there for applying for a job. And I was there because I could see I could change my entire family's future if somebody gave me a shot. And so I said, well, let me ask you a question. And by the way, all the brilliant stuff I've ever asked comes after that question. Do you mind if I ask you a question? And by the way, I always don't know what the next words are. Whatever time that buys me allows me to ask the best stuff in the world. So I asked him, isn't the bottom line around here whether you can buy properties for a profit or not? He said, yes. I said, you'll know in 30 days I can do that better than anybody you have. I just passed the first test of a property buyer. I fought back after I got a no answer. What did he have to lose? He says, okay, pal, you've got it. I still had a full-time job. I'm selling circuit breakers and stuff to hardware stores. I could go really fast. I got done at noon, went into the company. Everybody that was there waited for their up call. Guy had the back page of one of the magazines everywhere in Southern California, so we got a lot of phone calls. They waited by the phone for the phone to ring. I didn't have the luxury of that, so I started calling. If you had an expired listing, a foreclosure, when it got too late to call, I just made blind offers. I was the most hated person in Orange County in real estate because I made ridiculous offers because our formula was 60% of value minus repairs. That was our formula. I didn't know anything about real estate. I'm cold calling 100 people a day, and I have no idea what I'm talking about. I don't know a grant need from a trustee. Is that a lot of pressure?
Yes.
Okay. I took it as, you know what, this is an opportunity to learn. Every conversation I had, I thought, you know what, I'm not going to pretend I know anything I don't know. So somebody says, well, do you mind if we have an all-inclusive trustee on the property? I said, no, I don't mind at all. I don't know what it is. When you're honest with people, they open up and they help you. In the first 30 days, working part-time, I bought 10 houses wholesale, made 3% commission, which by the way, if you bought 10 houses, you got a 10% bonus. I made $33,000 that month which is equal to 1 year's income. The next month I did it again. The next month I did it again, with absolutely no experience in real estate. So the first thing I want to tell you is that you might already have the skill set. Now sometimes you have to add desire. You have to find a reason to bust your butt to get this done. Muhammad Ali was being interviewed. How did you get in boxing? I was 10 years old, someone stole my bike. I cried. My pop got upset, said, grow up, send me to a boxing ring. Next question was, when you're in the ring, when you start a fight, what are you thinking? He says, I look across the ring and I said, that's probably the guy that stole my bike. He was ready to go, man. He had to make up something that got him riveted. The next thing you might want to set is some goals in this business. Understand that, goals are some serious stuff. I've written stuff down and one day later, I found it. Why? Because I was looking for it finally. I understood that in the morning I was getting up is what I was chasing. Aaron told me, he set us a bunch of goals for pretty long time. He already got them all done. That's what happens. Best example of goal setting. How many of you guys know the story of Jim Valvano and NC State? That's a great documentary if you ever want to see it. Valvano was a little bit of a flamboyant coach. Coach Sloan was coaching NC State, got them to a championship. So when you were a high school star, you wanted to go to NC State to be coached by Sloan. And then he quit, and he went to another college. So the kids that were already there, not too happy. Who is this Jim Valvano? First practice, these all-star high school players and already established team members come to practice, and Valvano's there and there's no basketballs. There's a ladder and there's a gold pair of scissors under the basket. And they spent the entire practice doing what? They cut the nets down. What do you do when you're the NCAA champion? You cut the nets down. He was literally putting in their mind that 3 years from now, the team that I have is going to win the national championship. Did they do it?
Yes.
They did. That's what goals do. It makes you riveted on your what's next to list to do. When you wake up in the morning and you have a list, you don't waste your day, and you can accomplish a lot. I know education is important in this business, but how did somebody that had no idea what real estate was make 3 years of income in 3 months? Because I had those two things in mind. I was intense. I had been fired 5 times in a row, and I wanted to change that. I wanted to control my own financial outcome. And I set some goals and reached them. Also met a guy named Jim Rohn. How many know that gentleman? Jim Rohn was the business mentor for my life.
Wow.
And didn't teach me anything about real estate. But I met him within a month of being in the property business. And I don't know what he did to me, but he turned me on. I listened to the guy. And the first note I ever took was on top of a page. I was with somebody I knew. I showed him my first notice. I said, this guy does not need our money. I always want to know why people stand up in front of an audience and say stuff. Why people write books or reports. What's the agenda? Okay? I felt like his agenda was really pure. Why was he there? Because he had screwed up. He had messed up. He didn't want you to have less of a life. That was what he was about. And I bought into it. Wrote a set of goals. 8 years later, one of the goals was to be a millionaire. It took me 8 years. When I did the goal, I had this line go from the bottom. When I started, I was just about $1 million short of a millionaire. So every morning I got up and I said, I look at my net worth and I'm a millionaire. Is that a lie?
No.
That's the truth just told in advance. And that's what I wanted. And so this line didn't go straight up to $1 million. It did this stuff. That's life. So and then you finally get there. 8 years, literally to the day. He had a seat in another seminar. I went up to him with my little thing. I said, I did it. Thank you. That's why I teach. If there's someone I can affect, like Jim Rohn affected me, I get the biggest kick out of it. So that's why I'm here tonight. This is an interesting question. What's the most important word in real estate to you? I want you to think about that because it kind of dictates what you do with your money and how you treat real estate, and if you're going to flip or you're going to hold. So I'm just curious, what are some of the answers to that question that you have? And they all don't have to be the same, by the way, but what I'm going to share with you is what became obvious to me is the most important answer, what's the most important word in real estate, what I found out from my own life. So what are some of the answers?
Freedom.
Freedom, okay.
Sell.
Pardon me?
Sell.
Sell, okay.
Sell
Passive income.
Passive income. What about location? That's usually the holy grail. I hear that a lot. Okay. Okay. So let's talk about some of this stuff. This is a fourplex in Grand Junction, Colorado. Is that a pretty snazzy fourplex or just pretty much a box? Nothing special about that. About 1980, 81, 82, that sold for 200 grand in Grand Junction. In 1985, they mysteriously went on sale. And I made a bulk offer of all the HUD fourplexes in 1985, so that made me, that was what, 33 years ago? Maybe I have been in this business too long. And I bought those for 40 grand. Same exact location sold for about 200 3 years before. Same location sold for 40 grand in 85. What happened? Remember that word of oil shale? Oil shale was clicking in 81 and 82 and it disappeared after that. And we had a 50% vacancy factor in every unit, even 2 years after I bought it. You know why I was able to get it for $40,000? The negotiation took 9 months. My original offer was 40 grand. They laughed. About 3 months later, they came back and said, well, what's your best shot? I said, 40 grand. They didn't laugh as hard this time, but they still didn't. 9 months later, we put the deal together at 40 grand. Why did that happen? How many competitive bidders were there? Nobody. I was the only person in America. Now think about that. The only person in America that wanted that fourplex at 40 grand. They were built in 1980. The whole building was what, 5 years old? They were zoned as condos. I bought them for 10 grand a door, and no one else wanted them. Same exact location cost HUD millions of dollars and made an investor lots of money. Okay? Palm Springs, really exciting place. In 1988, and by the way, how I bought that Grand Junction fourplex, I didn't know anything about Grand Junction, but I had a friend whose dad had moved to Grand Junction. And every once in a while, I asked Marty, how's your dad doing? 1981, wonderful. 1982, wonderful. 83, wonderful. 84, awful. And 95 is terrible. You ought to go there and buy something, which I did. So sometimes your friends from not even in the business can know somebody that has a situation that you could say, you know what, I'm going to buy into it. Palm Springs, 1988, here's another way to buy property. Sometimes we don't observe very well. I was building something in Palm Springs. As I was driving every day, I had to pass 50 vacant lots with lakes and a golf course. In 1988, everything was going on crazy, and not one new house was being built on those 50 lots on the lakes and the golf course. I passed by 6 months before it dawned on me, oh my goodness, one guy must own this all. And he ain't building on it, so I'm going to call him up. Pulled up who owned it? Bass Brothers in Texas. I didn't know who the Bass Brothers were. They're equivalent to Donald Trump, basically. They're a big conglomeration. I didn't know that, so I called up to talk to the president. There was a big laugh, and 3 days later, with effort, guess what? I talked to him. He said, you're pretty persistent, so I'm going to talk to you. He said, they're already in escrow. And I thought, okay, thanks for taking the call. But you know, when I hung up, I thought, I should have said something else. I called him right back. I said, you know what, lots fall out all the time. When those fall out, presumptive close, give me a call. That was $1 million phone call, by the way. A couple days later, he calls me up. He says, you know what, it fell out of escrow. I'm going to fly to meet you. He came with a deposit receipt that was 1 inch thick with a table of contents, and the number one line said, personally liable. So he had put together a package what I could buy these 50 lots for. And I read the table of contents, and I said, to be honest with you, I can't do anything you want. How's that for negotiations? Thanks for coming, I can't do anything you want. I said, but here's what I can do, and I explained to him my plan. And after I said that, he kind of changed gears. He said, tell me about yourself. So I had kids, and here was my experience level and all that. He said, what's your hobby? I said, you know, we just built a custom home. I had more rooms than I needed, so I have actually am into model trains. A whole room of model trains. Guess what this guy's hobby was?
Model train.
Can you believe it? He was into model trains. He says, you know what, young man? He said, I'm going to give you your shot. He said, you fax over to me in Texas what you want, and I'll do it. 50 lots, $2 million, no payments, no down payment. I'll do it in 6 months. Hardest 6 months I ever worked. Made $1 million on that deal. Now, I'm not telling you that to brag, because I'm telling you that was a good location, a really good location. Golf course lots, lakes. About a few months later, I bought 7 custom home lots in 1989 and built 7 custom homes using investors who qualified for the financing. And we got done with them in June of 1990. Superior location. Gated area, okay? Really cool area. When I got done with them in June of 1990, we ran a full-page ad to sell them. I bought a golf cart and held myself and 6 people because I knew it was going to be like packed with buyers, and I would drive them around. No one ever called on that full-page ad. No one ever got on the golf cart but me. We couldn't sell them. The payments back then, interest was pretty much what was talked about here, 10%. We had $3,000 a month payments times 7, and I had partners that couldn't pay their share and a builder that left the country. So outside of that, it was working great. As the builder left the country, he said, I don't honestly know what you think you're going to do. I said, to be honest with you, I said, I'm not sure, but I'm not going to walk away from this without giving it everything I have. I went home, I talked to my wife, Marcia, and I said, we may have to sell our house to support this thing. He said, that's what you need to do. Now, that's a custom home we built, dream home. I didn't want to do that, which I never had to. Why was that? Can you give yourself a 21 grand a month raise in this business?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's what I did. I learned how to buy properties more ways. I flipped houses. I supported that whole thing until it went away. The last house we closed, we lost 62 grand. I wrote a 62 grand personal check to close that escrow. That's called a personal short sale. You remember that stuff. Now, coincidentally, Aaron graduates in 95, 96.
No, it was 95.
Oh, you're old too now? Oh. And now this is 6 years removed from this great time in real estate in '89. I buy him a Honda Civic for $15,700. The only reason I remember that is I buy a 3-bedroom house 2 days later for $13,300. And that's why I got good at understanding timing. Because I went, wait a minute, how did we go from the euphoria of '89 to buying a house in '95 for 13 grand? What made that happen? Well, that's why I got good at understanding the market and not getting in the way of that again. So I made $1 million in '88 and gave most of it back '89 to '92. No fun. Better location, and I got killed. Rosamond, this is you can barely see the sign, but when it says Rosamond Gateway to Progress, they haven't painted the sign for 40 years. You know? Rosamond, where's Rosamond? It's 9 miles after Lancaster, and after Lancaster there's nothing until you hit Rosamond. So if you think location's important, this is a good story. Somebody in 1989 thought it was a good idea to create building lots in Rosamond, and they lost them to the bank. The bank lost some money, they went under. $3 million was lent on this land project. And in about 2004, I get a phone call. Another way to buy houses, by the way, and lots or whatever is wholesale. Somebody very knowledgeable about land calls me up on the phone, and he said, I've just seen probably the best deal I've ever seen in my life. I'm not in a position to buy it. I'm too busy, so I'm going to pass it on to you. Have you ever gotten that phone call? That's what you work hard for, is so you're the go-to person for somebody that has the deal of a lifetime. He told me the story, $3 million, this is for till 270. The guy bought the note for 100 grand. He's making 170 grand selling it to you, and he doesn't care to hold the property. So what did I say to the guy? If I can't make it today, I'll go there as soon as I can? No. Now, I had no intention of going to Rosamond that day, but guess what? I went to Rosamond. When I stood on the lots, 93 view lots, single loaded, streets, curbs, sidewalks, street lights, the whole shebang already done for $3 grand a lot. And we would ultimately sell those finished homes for $280. When your land cost is 1% of your project, it's hard to screw it up.
Right.
I got that deal, not in a great location. Somebody did something in '89 that cost the bank $2.7 million. I bought exactly that same project and made millions on it years later. Okay? One more example of the most important word in real estate. This is just a single family home that has 3 stories. 2,000, not 3 stories high, 3 different tales to tell. I know you're all looking at it going,
That's not that good, but that's what we're doing.
he is getting all that. He's exaggerating his stuff. This sold for $365,000 in '06. In '09, it sold for a little less than that, 64. Just missing one digit. You're supposed to laugh. 64, same house, and 2017 it sold for 275. Okay? Why the price change? See, what's interesting about that, did that size of the house change? No. So what defines market value? Market value is the likely price that's going to come about when a buyer and seller are equally knowledgeable, equally motivated, and there's one more really important factor, and it's that the transaction is absent undue stimulus. What is transactional stimulus? Transactional stimulus, let's say you had a fourplex in Pasadena. What's that worth, $2 million? I don't know. Is that about right? Let's say I say, hey, you know what, I'm going to sell my fourplex for $2 million, but on this transaction, I'm going to carry the paper at no interest. Will that fourplex sell for a premium? Yes. So here's an appraiser's job. He looks at this one weird comp where in an area where all the fourplexes sell for $2 million, this sells for 2.4. His job is to look at that transaction and go, where'd the 400 grand show up? Why? Oh, look at the financing. That's why he deletes the 400 grand back to $2 million. Here's a good question. This house sold for $365 in 2006. Did we have transactional stimulus?
Yes.
No, you didn't need it. There were 20 comps that said the same story. You didn't need transactional stimulus. You had something much more dangerous called systemic stimulus. You had a lending world that literally didn't care if you had a job or an income, they would loan you, and it made prices explode. When I look at charts, I can tell you that's occurring. And that's why I sold 100 properties in 2005 and said, see y'all later, because this is nuts. I'm going to go to the sidelines and buy this stuff at a discount. 2009, we had what's called reverse stimulus. 80% of what was for sale was lender-owned, and prices went down by 80%, from 360 to 60-something. Wouldn't you like to learn how to be on the right side of that?
Yes.
Okay. That's why the most important word in real estate is timing. I would rather know when to than how to any day. When to is so much more important than how to. How to is okay. So let's talk about getting to a peak price. Aaron, is this the one that has all of the, like what we did in front of the realtors?
No, but I have that.
That's what I thought was coming. But anyway, so that's too late to switch that.
I can switch that out if you want. You want to go through this real quick and look?
I do. I want to be able to talk about that. Okay? Because I want to try
the
it.
Norris fire drill.
Fortunately, Aaron's here. What I want to be able to do is share with you what went on in the last cycles, and this isn't This isn't the
Presentation.
presentation, but it's important. How many of you concerned about what's next? That's why this room is packed, why people are standing in the back. I want you to get your money's worth. I would want to know this myself. And I always want to know it myself. When I'm looking at charts, that's what I'm trying to figure out is what's next. Should I exit a market? Am I okay to stay? And the best way to do that, to look at the future, is take a look at the past and what happened. And so I have been around for a while with my eyes open now looking at cycles. And so charts tell me a story. I think one of the things that happens for me that don't happen to economists, so there's times I debate with people that have PhDs in economics. I have a high school diploma and 35 years of street smarts getting my butt kicked. What's the difference? When I look at a chart, I can match it with a year. I can remember really good what 1990 did to me. So somebody can say, yeah, 1990 was pretty harmless. Really? No, it wasn't. If you were on the wrong side of that, that was painful. So charts tell you a story if you understand what they're telling you. And they create opportunity too. And it's not just in California. In Florida, we made a decision to buy. Yes? We're done?
We'll see.
Look at you. Oh, I love this. Thank you, Aaron.
You got lucky, I had.
We look at charts to make decisions about buying even in other states. Because I want to see if we're having that same phenomenon of, oh my gosh, things are on sale. Like Grand Junction was on sale, and like California was on sale in 2009, Florida was on sale in 2014 and 2015. Why? They had a 4-year foreclosure process. They were in 2011 in 2015. How did I know that? I looked at a report from Fannie Mae. I was going to interview Doug Duncan. And to prepare for that, I looked at their quarterly report for the last quarter of 2014. 25% of the losses for the whole nation for Fannie Mae came from one state, Florida. That made me happy. That meant that ratio of what's for sale is dominated by REOs and the prices fell through a rock, through the floor. I called my best friend who lives in Orlando. I said, man, poke around and look for building lots because there's a builder that does not want what they have. 2 days later, we were in escrow with a tract of lots for a third of replacement cost. So that's what charts do for me, okay? So let's take a look at this cycle. California has this history. Whee! Oh, whee! And, you know, I guess I would be really interested if is next. So let's figure out why that occurs by looking at all the cycles. Is that fun?
Yeah.
That's what floats my boat. I get a big kick out of that. So here's the 80s. By the way, what one chart, think about this. What would be the one chart you go, you know what? If that chart tips over, I know it's going to be a problem for prices. So what would be, go ahead and tell me, what's the one chart you would think, oh boy?
Interest rates. Yeah.
Interest rates, okay. Affordability.
Employment.
I didn't hear
Supply.
Supply of properties, okay.
Inventory.
Did I hear employment?
Unemployment.
Unemployment, okay. So as we go through this, we have some of these categories, and it's going to be, that's why I like charts, because all of those things, you know, I'm in. Migration, all that. What's important? Well, we're going to figure it out together. Here's our price boom, 74 to 80. We went from almost equal to the United States median price. California was only $2,000 different way back here. And then we started to separate. We got to nearly 100, and the country got to 62. We went from 34 to 99, almost a 300% increase. So this was our price boom, 74 to 80. We had another one, 85 to 89. One from 119 to 196. We were now double the national price. We had the crazy boom from 97 to 07, where we went and tripled again. Tripled. That's an amazing statement. In between those times, 81 to 85, we were pretty flat. Going from 107 to 119. Nothing drastic happened. Boring 5 years compared to what's kept possible for California. And then in 1990 to 96, we had a slow point, and then we gradually went down for a while. So we had a price pause, we had a price downturn, and then we had a price crash. price crash looks like this. That's scary stuff. Go from 560 to 274 in 2 years. That's the Great Depression of real estate. You didn't get out of the way of that one, you got killed. You really did. We wrote our report here. So let's talk about what were the charts like. In 1980 to 85, this was the unemployment chart. Record setting. So if unemployment is a factor, and a big factor, we had it here. If interest rates are a factor, that was your median your interest rate in the same time frame. So you have this unbelievable unemployment, and your interest rates were 15.5 for a 30-year fixed loan. So how's the price going to do?
Gonna go lower.
Shouldn't we get killed?
Yeah.
You should. Hey, let's take a look. Your affordability got down to 17% for the first time. So that's a number that's significant. Trustee sales went from 2,900 to 28,500, an increase of 981%. Migration was still positive during that cycle. And what happened to our median price? Remember, this was the slow, let me see if I have a replication of it. No. Remember, we didn't go down. We had a 15% interest rate. We had almost 10% unemployment. We didn't go down in price. Now, you wouldn't know this is important, but this is going to turn out to be important. This is the ratio of trustee sales to sales. This is a line of sales. Whenever you have a downturn, sales go down, trustee sales go up, and the ratio grows bigger than normal because you're having both headed in the wrong direction. Trustee sales going up, sales go down, the ratio can get big. The ratio in the 80s got to about 27% and then went down. This isn't meaningful until you start going to the next set of years and you start putting the pieces together. So now we're in the downturn of 90 to 96. First time that California went down in price. So we had unemployment of nearly 10% in the 80s. What did we get in the 90s? We peaked at about 7.5 and improved every year since after that. Got down to what, 5% in 97? So we were never as high as this and went down every year after 91. Interest rates weren't 15. They started at 10, improved to about 7.5. So unemployment was better. Interest rates were half. Affordability hit 17% again. Trustee sales went up from 7,100 to 70,000, a 981% increase. Exactly the same as the other cycle. You can't make this stuff up, man. When I did that multiplier, I went, are you kidding me? The same percent. Okay, so foreclosures went up again. Migration, we lost 4 years in a row. We wrote the California Comeback Report January of 97. That's when we predicted the prices would double in the next 8 years in California, starting in 97. So this is our journey in the 90s, where we lost about 15% in price. We had better unemployment. We had unemployment that was high. It wasn't 10, it was 7.5. We had interest rates that got down to 7.5, not 15. We had migration loss, and we had a price gradually that went down. Here's the trustee sales to sales ratio. So it went up, and then it stayed up. And it reached almost 40% during the years where we had price declines. So remember, when we look back at the chart, we had improving unemployment, we had improving interest rates. They were all trumped by this. The ratio of trustee sales to sales is starting to become something I'm going to pay attention to. Now, if I end up on this being important, what I'm going to be able to do is look forward and say, what are the odds of that getting out of control in the next downturn? That's why we're doing this. So now we have the median price of 2007 to 2012 crashed by half. So how's our unemployment? It got seriously high again. over 9.5%, and then improved every year after that. Interest rates, can't even find the chart. It's so low. So interest rates here start at 6, go down to below 4. So here you don't have a price hit at all. Here you have a price hit of about 15%, and here you have a price crash of 50%. So let me ask you a question. If you know the future of interest rates, absolutely, what can you tell me about the future of the median price of California?
Nothing.
Nothing. Isn't that interesting to know? That's a fact. That isn't what's important. Affordability got down to a very low number, 11 or 12%, because of all the nonsense. So that was an important factor where you could say, okay, we're so overpriced that affordability is setting records. We didn't go up 1,000% in foreclosure numbers. This time we went up like 4,000%. That became a problem. Oddly enough, migration came in during the downturn. That had never happened before. So if that was a chart I was paying attention to, which it was, because every other downturn started with this nonsense. Well, we had this when prices were booming at their peak. So people were leaving California with their dough, cashing in saying, well, I can retire, I can move somewhere else and buy something really cool. And then when prices crashed by half, we had all this migration back. So it kind of messed with what I thought was a formula. I'm going to pay attention to migration. Well, it didn't work this time. So what's the one chart that said, yeah, this makes perfect sense, was this ratio of trustee sales to sales. This is the ratio. We got to 80%. 80% trustee sales to sales, and you're guaranteed a price crash. Because it's the lender stuff that's going to dominate the comps. If they have too much out there for sale, you have a $64,000 Moreno Valley house closed escrow. And it doesn't matter what's for sale next door is for sale for $250 and it's owned by a private party. It's got a comp to deal with, and he's going to get 64 grand for his, and he ain't going to sell it. So the dominant sale is lender after lender after lender property. Now, is that a good sign for us if we're buyers? Yes. Yes. So as a buyer, would I look intentionally for that chart? You betcha. Because it's absolutely going to be sale time. And some inventory way more discounted than others. So if you're a builder, see, if I was a builder, I'd buy all my building lots when I saw this chart. I'd buy them for a decade. Say, lock and load because they're free. They're on sale. So, yes?
Quick question. 80%, you're saying 100 out of 100% of the sales, 80% were...
Not sales, just the ratio of trustee sales to sales.
Okay.
Not all of these reverted to the lender, but a great many of them did.
Okay.
But, so that, what I'm talking about is just the ratio
I see.
of trustee sales to sales. In counties like San Bernardino, it was over 100%. This is California. But you had Riverside and San Bernardino. San Bernardino was over 100% trustee sales to sales. They foreclosed on more houses than they sold. There were 50 houses for sale for every $1,000 price increment. It was like shooting ducks or fish in a barrel. Ducks don't go in a barrel. That's a market where you go, wow, if I can be a cash buyer, I get excited, yes.
So basically, I'm a little bit confused, so
Okay.
bear with me for a second. So you're saying that as the amount of trustee sales gets closer to the amount of sales, that's a problem?
That's a problem. It's a problem for whoever owns stuff.
Yeah.
It's a great opportunity for if you're the buyer. If you're on the right side of that, you get, wow, this is exciting. Now, what's interesting, it improved after that. We'll just turn it off. That's not good. That's not the point of Bruce. It improved by artificial means. We didn't have anything happen here except for policies got together and say, you know what? We better not foreclose on anything else. We're getting 20 cents on the dollar for stuff that's selling. And if this continues, this chart would have literally been on the ceiling. And so they just said, you know what? We're not going to foreclose anymore. Now, that's really important for what's next. Because those policies are in the mind of what's next. Okay? Question?
Yeah, quick question. Isn't that about the time, somewhere in around 2010, 11, they started putting together the big investment groups and they were selling just thousands of homes
Yep.
to be rented out?
That's right.
And they're still held
Yep.
by those companies who have consolidated.
Yes, they must not have liked management. By the way, a lot of concern about, well, they're going to sell them someday and that's going to be a problem. That's not their business model. They've turned them into REITs, they put them into bonds. They're like scattered apartments. That's not going to happen. Okay, so this is a chart that's really important. So we have to think about, okay, well, what's the likelihood during the next slowdown, downturn, or crash? What's the likelihood of this ratio of trustee sales getting into the danger zone? So list of reasons why it's not going to happen. Lending is tight. I don't know how many of you have gotten a loan the last year or two. It's not a piece of cake. Aaron just got 3 loans on a little package of new homes that he bought from me. He had to send something like 130 different PDFs. Not 130 pages of information, 130 different PDFs over a what, about a 2.5 month process to finally get a yes answer from the lender.
Yeah.
I have one loan in my life that I got for a very specific reason. And I have, what's the perfect FICO score? 850.
Yeah.
Have a perfect FICO score, money in the bank, free and clear stuff. It took me 90 days to get a yes answer from the lender. 90 days on one loan at about 50% LTV. It is not easy to get a loan. Why is that important? Lending products that disappeared in 2000, say 6 and 7, were the big problem because people got in to these deals thinking, well, you know what, that loan program will be there 3 years later. When I had that 24-month time bomb go off, I'll certainly be able to refi. Well, that loan program was gone, and therefore those all turned into foreclosures. We don't have any creative loan programs to end. So that's a big factor in what's not going to get foreclosed on. People that have loans really had to qualify, really had to have dough. And that's been going on for a long time now, 8 or 9 years. The second thing is, and this is very unusual, we actually learned something. This is the 80s price boom. What did we do? We took equity out. This is the 2000 price boom. We took lots of equity out. This is the price boom that we've been experiencing. We've taken nothing out. California has doubled in price and hasn't taken one dime collectively of equity out to play with it. It's still sitting there.
Who's taking the equity out? Who are you talking about?
No, that's right, owners. Owners had equity lines, refi, pulling cash out. We didn't do that this time. That's not yet, but so what? For the last 9 years. So if you want to say you're going to create a big foreclosure chart, really? With what? You've got all these loans where people actually had to qualify, prices have doubled, and they're still sitting on this equity. That's never happened before. Okay? Fixed loans at 3 or 4% interest. This is the Fannie Mae, basically, book of business. This was June of 2017. Their weighted loan to average, 57.9%. Fixed rate, this is the overall book, about 95%, but look at all these years, 96, 97, 98. 98% of the loans that have been gotten in the last 5-6 years, fixed. At what interest rate? 3 or 4. Mm-hmm. All the equity is still in place. You actually had to qualify for the original loan. They put money down. How are you going to have a 1,000 or 2,000% increase in foreclosures? It isn't going to happen. And this is important to draw that conclusion because it means you're not going to have a price downturn. It means you can have a recession with unemployment. We already know that. That can go up. But if you don't have this ratio of foreclosures, your prices won't go down. That's the biggest thing. You can have interest rates go up. That doesn't always result in price damage. Okay? You have a big percentage of cash purchases. They don't have any financing. They're not going anywhere. So even people that are foreign buyers, a lot of those people bought cash. Sometimes they paid too much, but they bought it for cash. So what if their $2 million investment in San Jose goes to $1.5 million? They're going to lose anything? No. They're just going to sit there. That's a big difference. You have investor purchases. Investor purchases that bought, have financed, they cash flow. By and large, they're not going to go anywhere. Investor purchases are very different in 2017 and 16 and 15 than the investor purchases of 04, 05, and 06. Those were not investors, those were speculators. They were betting on higher prices, not cash flow. There was a guy that was selling properties to a group of people working for a big company. That's all they did was sell rental properties. He heard me talk about the California crash in late 2005. He came up and talked to me. He says, "You scared me to death. I've never heard anybody say anything negative about this market." He showed me his list of properties. Had 64 properties that produced negative $20,000 a month. He had a $3 million equity position though. 20,000 negative. How did he pay for that? He encouraged people to get a page just like his. He sold dozens of homes a month to other investors so they too could have a $3 million net worth and a $20,000 negative cash flow. I said, "You want my honest opinion? You have 6 months to end up being a millionaire. You own properties in California, Florida, both states are going to get killed. You get out of here, you're rich. You don't get out of here, in a nanosecond, you'll be broke." That's tough to sell when you're looking at your sheet and you're worth a bunch of money. He didn't sell. Okay? But many people didn't. But investor, he was an investor, he was a speculator. The only way he survived was the price accelerated. That's not who's owned this stuff. Who owns this stuff now is cash flow. It all makes sense. Most of it makes a lot of sense. We haven't had a construction boom. We were introduced recently by somebody very knowledgeable in Riverside, owns a business with a lot of agents. I was the opening speaker, and he said something to this effect. He said, I don't know if you've driven around, he said, "We're having a building boom. There's building everywhere." Now, that's what it felt like to him. That's why I like charts. Now, I had to counter what he said because it was important for the audience to understand that we're having a building boom in comparison to what we had 3 years ago, or 2 years ago, or 1 year ago. But historically, you know where we are in Riverside? We're building 25% of normal. That's not a building boom. And that's what we're building in California. We're building about 25%, 30% of the homes that normally are built. Why is that significant? Because when you have price downturns or pauses, and builders are notorious, they're the worst timing experts ever. And why is that? It's because the evidence for them is, did I just build something and there was a buyer show up? It's immediate gratification. Look at that. In 2005, I built something, people come, show up, we're going to buy more dirt, and we're going to build stuff, and then all of a sudden no one showed up. Now, unfortunately for a builder, if you've built a whole bunch of homes, which if you look at the biggest building years, 1980, 89, 05, it's repetitive. They build the most houses when it's over. What happens? The stuff that's not sold goes on sale, and sometimes represents 15% of the entire market. We started in 2018 with 2% of unsold inventory instead of 15, because building hasn't boomed. So if we had a downturn, everything that was unsold new house would be gone in months, not years. That's a big difference. It wouldn't be a big participant. No crazy loan products to end, we already covered that. And we already have a template for consumers in place. So if you had something occurred where you had a lot of foreclosures, do you think the lenders would say, well, we're going to aggressively foreclose? That isn't what we've taught people we're going to do. We've taught people we're going to give them a hug, and we're going to say it's okay if you don't make your payment, we'll negotiate it, we'll let you sit there. That's what we've taught people. On a radio show, we just interviewed Mike Novak Smith. At one time in 2007 or 8, he had about 1,000 REO listings, one of the biggest in the country. So we interviewed him particularly about, okay, well, what are lenders' attitude now about foreclosures? You know what they're doing? They're keeping them. They're allowed to keep them. They even approach people that are behind saying, well, give us a deed in lieu of foreclosure. We will pay you to do that, and then they rent them. Wow. That's their policy. There's not going to be a foreclosure chart that goes out of the range that's safe. There's no way. Even the ones they get, they're going, we like that. We'll keep it. So if you don't have a foreclosure boom, you don't have a price hit. So I don't know if that makes you feel better about where you're at. It makes me feel better. Because if we didn't have a foreclosure gut, then I'm dealing with a different California than I've ever dealt with. Okay? So that's my conclusion. Now, because of that, and I sold some stuff in California and went to Florida, not because I was afraid of California crashing. So, there's always rumors. Oh, Bruce left California. Bruce left to go to Florida because I got to exchange a house that was built in 1980 in a bad area that I had that went up from 64 grand to 275 to buy 2 brand new homes that were built for me. Every time I sold one of those, I ended up with 2 Florida houses and twice the rent in a good area. Would you do that?
Absolutely.
Okay, see, that makes sense. That's why I did it. I'm also building homes in Riverside right now. So we have about 5 spec houses just a day or two ago. And by the way, I just interviewed the builder that I work with, that I'm partners with. I interviewed him on the radio show to talk about how he looks for land and what he does for due diligence and all that. Because that's a niche I'm very interested in, because I'm not afraid of what's going on in California. I'm not afraid of a foreclosure gut. I do think there's a new housing shortage, and I don't think that's going to catch up overnight. So I'm interested in that niche. We can put together deals that make 100 grand a piece. It's hard to find that, flipping that, okay? So that's why I'm excited about the building stuff. I found a partner that I don't have to do anything other than put up money. That's a pretty trusted guy. And so, they're out there. They need you as much as I need him. I don't know how to do what he knows how to do. And he doesn't have the money to do it on his own. So it's perfect. We just do it over and over again. So it's a good thing. Okay, how about questions? Yes?
So this is mostly focused on Southern California as a whole?
It's California.
But what's California?
Yeah, California in general.
And do you ever do analysis on a more micro geographic area?
It's a great question. So do I do micro? The answer is I would if I thought it was more significant than the big picture, but I don't. When we have a downturn, a crash, a slowdown, or whatever, it's big picture stuff that causes it. It's state numbers, not local numbers. So that's a lot of the stuff where I've ended up with conclusions, like our reports, sometimes they'll say, well, you don't have any comparison with consumer sentiment and price. Well, it's not that I didn't do the comparison. I did the comparison, and there's no evidence that it makes sense to follow it. Okay, that's why it's not in the report. So there's a lot of things like rent ratio to price. It doesn't make any sense to follow because it doesn't show the same evidence every time. So that's why the micro isn't more important than the big picture. So I look for the big picture stuff where I say, okay, this whole thing is in trouble. It doesn't matter if you have really great area or whatever, you're going to take a hit because the whole system has got a problem. It's systemic. That's what I look for. Systemic events, down or up. Yes?
Everybody always says there's an up and down cycle. So what do you say when there's no down cycle now?
Yeah, it's going to be the weirdest ending we've ever had. We're going to look around. It's going to be like a halftime in a doubleheader in baseball. We used to have the doubleheaders. So we're going to someday slow down and have a 1980s period where we do nothing for a couple years, and then we're going to gradually go back up. Now, here's a significant thing. I'll go back to the price chart, I hope. It's very easy to go up in price when you have a running start of this price drop. It's not going to be easy to go up if we never have a price drop and we stay here, and now we have to go up from here. That's going to be different. California has really never had to do that. So we're going to have to build on a top, not a bottom. So what's going to happen is inflation of prices in California are going to be much less than our normal cycle. So it becomes safer, not more dangerous. Yes?
So, I mean, we're not going to have a bottom of the charts going instead of like 89 crash into the city market.
That was commercial, yeah. I mean, the 80s. Okay, you're talking about why the crash occurred?
Yeah, well, those were examples, but could you see possibly, as you said, the crash could be another shift in government to cause that crash to come?
Another shift of government?
Government policy.
Maybe like revenue tax reforms and stuff like that they're trying to push with us.
Okay. Like, for instance, California, one of the big negatives for California is you just stopped allowing me to write off my state tax. Yeah, that's a negative. If I look at my tax bill, and say, what does it cost me to stay in California? It costs me about $8 grand a month to stay here. If I lived in Florida, I wouldn't have that bill. I wouldn't have anything to say, well, I can't write it off on my federal tax because Florida doesn't have the state tax. So that is a concern in a sense. Will you have people intentionally migrate out of California to save that money? Yeah. Will they go in droves? Probably not.
Well, because like, the Democrats, are, you know, I don't care which side of it's at, but they kind of want to go after that, like, real estate investors and stuff like that, because they're like, oh, there's money there.
Yeah, well, there is money there. So Prop 13, you start playing with that for investor property. The commercial world is more concerned about that. What about rent control? That is something to be concerned about. So yeah, we can create policies in California where it would systemically be bad, okay? Would you create a big pile of foreclosures because of that? I don't think so. And see, the answer to our question, at least for 30 years, is how do you know you're going to have a price hit? Trustee sales get too big of a percentage of what's going on. I don't see it.
Well, that's, the question is if they take away the law that they passed, where they can keep it on their books as positive instead of negative, and when they're buying it back, if that goes away.
It's such a small amount that it's so immaterial. They're not foreclosing on a lot of properties. They're foreclosing on nothing. So they're keeping it. Let me come here first and then there. Yes?
How do you think a trade war, if it really happens, and the prices at Walmart, Kmart, Target, you know, people just get shocked. In Home Depot, it'll hurt them, Lowe's, etc.
Yeah, you'll have some of that go into an economy. You'll have unemployment go up. Okay? We had unemployment go all the way up to almost 10% and didn't have a real estate price hit because the foreclosures got to 27%, not 40 or 80. And so, I mean, that's the history. You can have interest rate hikes and have no price impact. I don't see how we have a lot of foreclosures this time. I just don't see the math of it. There is no way. If it went to trustee sale, so we bought a trustee sale. People were buying that stuff at 80 cents on the dollar.
I know.
And Fannie Mae's loan position is 56%. So you foreclose on most of the loans, it's going to get bought. It's not going to be an REO. It just won't. Yeah.
So let's say historically 17% was that affordability at 70%. That's a bad thing. The last 10
17. Okay. 17% creates a chart that causes problems. So 17% affordability is usually the price peak. So you now tilt over. What happens? Your inventory stops selling and it goes up. Foreclosures go up. So you had that happen in 1980. Foreclosures went up 1,000%. And got to only 27% of sales. Went up 1,000% and did that. Went up 1,000% in the 90s, got to 40%. Went up 4,000%, got to 80%. So that affordability chart creates a slowing of sales, creates inventory that goes up, creates foreclosures increases. But what's the most important factor? How big is that ratio going to get? And this cycle, there's no way it's going to get out of control. It just isn't.
Even affordability went down.
Affordability, let's say affordability gets to 17, it's going to have the same picture as the 80s. It's going to go, because there's so much equity and the interest rates are fixed at 3 and 4%, and the loan programs weren't bogus, and people put down payments that really qualified, and they care about their credit. They got tons of equity. You just, I don't see how it materialized. And by the way, if I thought it would, I'd be, okay, that's another opportunity. I just don't see it. Because the charts tell me you could have higher interest rates, you could have higher unemployment, you could have migration out, you could have all these things. You don't have this high mix of foreclosures, you don't have a big price hit. And we just don't have evidence that it's possible this time. Coming on this side, yes sir.
Do you compare real estate chart, like, stock chart, if the price goes high,
Yeah.
maybe bounce?
Yeah, that's an interesting, so yeah, I've compared real estate price charts with every other investment known to man. Gold, silver, stocks, whatever.
So based on these charts,
Okay,
the price would be bounced down or stay for a while.
okay, well, let's just play with this for a minute. How did stocks do? Let's just pick, did stocks go up here?
Yes, you get the bubble, 89.9.
Okay, what,
Going
did
up.
stocks go up?
Yeah.
Stocks went up during that cycle? So did real estate. Okay? What I'm saying, it's not gonna be consistent. So here you have 98, 99, 2000, real estate started going up. Stock market went crazy at the same time and then it crashed. So you had a stock crash, but you already had a real estate boom going on. You have a real estate price boom, you have a stock price boom. So when it's not consistent, I can't say, well, that's an indicator. Because it isn't, it's not consistent. You can have both happen together, you can have both happen separately. There's nothing that I can say, look at that, it happens every time. And that's what I look for, okay? Yeah.
2 questions. One, for the next downturn, you're going to use the trustee to sales ratio. The second question is, that one looks like a good ratio to use for a buying indicator. Do you also use it as a selling indicator?
Selling indicator, yeah, I would say that would be my new selling indicator. And that's new. Affordability has always been my selling indicator. Now I have a more refined formula, let's say. So I have a 17% affordability that probably is going to say sales are going to slow, foreclosures are going to increase, all those negative things are going to happen. But if you don't get to that ratio of trustee sales that cause a danger, then 17% affordability plays out like it did in 1980 to 83 and 4. Nothing. So that's the fun part about learning all this stuff, is that you can take all you know, and then if you challenge what you know every time, that's what I do. Okay? I don't ever think, okay, I've got it whipped. That's how it is. Nope. I look at stuff all the time, and every time I look, I like, that's another piece I hadn't paid attention to. And sometimes it's not evidence until it happens over a period of time. We never had this ratio of 80% foreclosures and got down in half in price. We never had that happen. But now you can look at it and go, okay, well, that's more significant than affordability. It really is. Yes, I'll cover it right there.
So right now on your level of your favorite metrics, it would be trustee sales, and then affordability, and then what would
Not just trustee sales, but
trustee
ratio.
Ratio, and then you have affordability.
Affordability is going to have, if it gets to 17%, you have a history of 3 cycles where sales stop or foreclosures go up, inventory grows, all those things will happen.
What would your third metric be then? Or something, or things that you've been looking at, you're like, that might be a thing, but I'm not too sure yet.
Actually, I think the only 2 you really need is those 2, because affordability reaching 17 has a domino effect every time.
Okay.
It's the initial chart is the most important one. This is what causes that. It's going to cause foreclosures to go up. What's going to cause foreclosures not to go up excessively is the stuff we just looked at. All of the policies that have been in place that have safeguarded the system from a disaster happening again. And even if it did, they don't go through this, we're going to reach 80% of foreclosures in a marketplace before we react and say we're not going to foreclose. That policy is already in place. They'll stop that dead in its tracks. So you just won't have it. Yes?
So what was the trustee sale ratio is like for the indication group?
I can't hear you, sorry.
Trustee sale ratio percentage, what was that indication for?
That's an indication. The trustee sale ratio to sales is an indication of how big your price damage is going to be.
What's the percentage?
What makes up the ratio?
Okay, 27% in the 80s did no price damage. 40% in the 90s gave us a gradual downturn. 80% wiped us out.
And also the trustee sale, if it goes up, isn't that means also affecting the employment and all the other factors?
Well, trustee sales going up is reacting to something else, right? So it's reacting to somebody just lost their job, they can't make their house payment. Right. So this domino goes first probably to employment, to a foreclosure charge. That's going to happen in a recession. But is it going to get out of control? That's what I'm saying. I don't see it. Yes, sir.
So all these things we've been saying for years that we got to geek out on, they're gone. So let me ask you about this, because having listened to you for 10 years, migration was always a chart you were looking at.
Yeah.
Well, go to U-Haul and see who's coming and going.
Well, that's still true.
Okay, so but migration, you say, is caused by building here in California. People from the bordering states come in to hang drywall in the sun. So maybe we could talk a little bit about, we're not creating new units right now, and what factors could lead us to start creating a significant amount of new inventory.
new inventory that's being built,
Yeah.
okay, probably not gonna happen this cycle.
Okay.
Partly is, if you're a builder, one of the people we have at the Nixon Library event in September is John Burns. John Burns has his finger on the pulse of hedge funds and builders. He's the guy, the go-to guy. Yeah, he's just a smart guy, and people trust his opinion. Well, his opinion of building just exploding in California, it's not gonna happen because of all the regulation, fees, and fear that you can't get to the finish line. You don't have a known, okay, I'm finally done. And so builders, they can choose somewhere else to build. And
We
so,
got negative, what, 190,000 last year?
you know, I hear that stuff. We should have a price boom if we're really missing houses, wouldn't we? We're not having a 20% increase. We're having a mild increase. So I think, unfortunately, the housing shortage, so you have only 3 or 4 months of inventory, it's not matched with 6 months of demand, or you'd have a price increase that would explode. Why do you have no demand? Because we're not lending to people that can't really qualify. They're not even being allowed to participate. And how you know that is in, let's say, 2008, FHA's business, something like 48% of it was to a FICO score that was less than 600. Now it's 5%. We're missing 95% to our president. Okay. So that's, I mean, I just don't see the building booming to the extent it did before. And that's, it just.
So migration's gonna keep going out.
Migration's gonna keep going out, but for other, for a lot of other reasons. Yes, sir.
Last year, you were talking about 2% interest rates eventually and an economic slowdown.
Yes.
We were saying by the end of 2018, you're thinking some type of economic slowdown and then 2% interest rates eventually. Are you still seeing that, and why?
Okay, so we wrote a report, gave it January of last year. 2%, 40 trillion in debt. Am I still confident that's going to occur? Yes. Okay, and here's why. When you have the next recession, what happens is the Fed lowers interest rates every time we have a recession, 4 or 5 percentage points on the short end. There's something called a yield curve, okay? And there's something called an inverse yield curve. So I'll just try to use my memory here. In 1990, we had an inverse yield curve where the short end was paying more interest rate than the 30-year. That's an inverse yield curve at 10%. We did it in 2000 at 8%. 7%, 6.5% in 2007. We're going to do that about a year from now at less than 3%. An inverse yield curve says you're about to have a recession. The Fed has raised interest rates, going to slow the economy, but for the first time ever, we're not going to have a 5% running start to lower the interest rate. We're going to have less than a 3% to lower. You're going to have the Fed need to lower interest rates, and they're going to lower it to the extent that they usually do. You're going to have negative interest rates. You're going to end up with a mortgage that starts with a 2. During the next recession, I don't care if it's for 6 months, you probably have that window of opportunity. Now, if that coincides with, let's say, aggression and lending to investors. So Fannie Mae is in the mood to loan investors more money. They haven't figured out how to do that yet, and they're not privatized yet. But if they go from government-owned to privatized, the investor may get a shot to refi all their inventory at 3% or so. That would be, think about the major impact that would have on our economy. You'd get a lot of people that have spending money. And that's really significant because your tax bill is going to go up. People like me are retiring saying, I'd like to get on my Medicare and my Social Security. And we're retiring at 10,000 people a day. That would make spendable income possible. So that would be not a bad thing.
Do you see that as a decent possibility?
Yes,
them
I do.
going government to privatize Fannie Mae?
Yes. Yeah, we've been invited to speak in front of Fannie Mae 3 times.
Okay.
The last time, it was really serious.
Okay.
They were trying to figure this out. And that was the one thing in private conversations that was standing in the way, is that's what needs to happen. The second that happens, I feel like that's a very high likelihood.
Stock price.
Yeah. What was it, about $1?
Yeah, it's $1.30.
So it sounds like what I'm hearing is, I'm assuming what you're saying, and a lot of this is specific to California, but I'm guessing the lenders aren't going to want to take their houses anywhere, So only the places where there's still a hangover with, like you said, the 4 years of foreclosure process, doesn't sound like there's gonna be any bargains anywhere except for whatever's left from the last downturn for some time.
Well, there's bargains all the time. We fund loans every month in the millions of dollars. Where did the people find it? They find it by putting a sign out that says we buy houses, or a mailer, or they build a house. There's deals, there's always deals. And there's always somebody that has a messed up circumstance. It's just not gonna be under the title of REO and short sale. It's gonna be under the title of private owner has stinky situation and tons of equity and may walk away and let you solve it, not him. Okay, last question, and I'm not gonna leave, so I'll hang around here, but let's just do one more question first. 2 more questions.
What's your opinion regarding baby boomers, which
Right.
Are they able to keep their property? In California.
When you turn, one reason why I'm in Florida. Guys, thank you, by the way, for standing this whole time. Thank you very much. That's pretty cool. One of the reasons I'm in Florida, and very particularly in Leesburg, is that it's a senior population. So senior people that own homes, as they grow older, need caretakers. When you're 65, you have 2 caretakers. When you're 70 or when you're 85, you have 7. What that means in the next 20 years, as those people grow older, the migration of caretakers is going to be 350% more than the senior. That's my renter. My renter is the nurse that takes care of that. That's the demographics I like you were saying, where people are going to head. They're going to head to be a caretaker because there's going to be an influx of construction of hospitals, and there's going to be jobs for that. So that's the kind of thing I look like. Do seniors usually keep their properties? Yeah, they may downsize, but a lot of seniors own stuff free and clear. What's scary is the net worth of a senior that doesn't own a home. That's scary. You're one accident away from being homeless, to be honest with you. Last question, yes.
So if you have property in LA, like our prices are as high as 2005, 2006 levels.
Okay.
And what do you think about cashing out and going to other states, whether it's, or I know you suggested like Oregon and Florida, you think maybe that's a good call? Like the high desert hasn't really got to that level
Correct.
yet, so
Yeah.
I'll keep that. What
Well,
about like Central LA?
Every circumstance is different. So would I be a seller? It depends on my circumstance. I sold homes in Moreno Valley for $275 that are now worth $300. They may get to $350. I don't know. Okay. I could care less. I paid $64 grand for it, and selling it accomplished what I was there for. It went up. It gave me a bunch of free and clear real estate. So I guess the answer is, what's your big game plan? Does it get simpler by selling some of your stuff that's gone up hundreds of thousands of dollars? Why would you hold it for the last 50 grand? See, that's a speculation, not an investment. You bought an investment, and here it's done exactly what you asked it to do, so maybe it is time to cash it out. Don't be afraid to pay some taxes too, by the way. A lot of people didn't do that in 2006. So why aren't you selling? Well, I pay tax on all the gains. Well, that solves itself in about 18 months. They didn't have a gain. I'm very conservative these days, so if I could land on these, like it's over space, if that's what you're asking me, if I sell this stuff, I get to a space where literally my world is financially sound for the rest of my life, I would cash that check. I would definitely do that. Because what happens after that is you get a new attitude. You don't have to do a stinking thing. Well, opportunity comes to people like that. Mike Cantu hasn't needed a stinking thing for years. He did 50 wholesale deals last year. You know how much time he spends working a week? 1 hour. He's become a thoroughfare for deals. He's earned the right. People call him with deals they can't put together. He calls the seller, puts it together, shares the profit, flips it to somebody. Done deal. The rest of the time he's floating in the ocean surfing. That's the life he's arranged and earned. He got to the point. He was the first one that really convinced me owning stuff free and clear was smart. I always used to think leverage and all that stuff. And all of a sudden I started listening to him. It's like, And I'm competitive. I said, yeah, I can own some of those free and clear. That's a good idea. And so sometimes who you hang around with, he said something that was very profound one time, and I know it's really simple. This was at a seminar I asked him to be one of the speakers. We were sitting next to each other. He said, you know what I really like? He said, I really like to know that there's a couple out there working their butts off all month to send me 35% of their income. And I just went, whoa. If you have 3 of those, that means you have 100% of their collective income. If you have, you do the math, all of a sudden you get really happy that other people are out there, working really hard to send you money. And that was pretty exciting, kind of an eye-opener for me. Guys, thanks so much for having me.